Thailand, there's a certain kind of story that lives only on the road, passed between the headlights of strangers moving in opposite directions. These aren't city tales. They belong to the long, dark stretches of asphalt that connect the provinces, arteries of commerce and story that carry tales as often as they carry cargo. Tonight's story comes from one of those arteries, a lonely stretch of highway in Nakhon Sawan. It's a place where the darkness between towns feels absolute, a deep rural black that seems to press in from all sides, swallowing the beams of your headlights just a few meters from the bumper, leaving you feeling like you're piloting a tiny ship through a black, bottomless ocean. If you find value in these explorations of the world's quiet corners, a simple like on the video helps us bring more of them.
Light. It means a great deal to our small team. This particular account was shared with me by a man whose uncle, Samchai, had been driving long-haul trucks for over 30 years. To Samchai, his 10-wheeled rig wasn't just a machine, it was a partner, a living beast of burden with its own groans, sighs, and rhythms. He knew every curve of these roads, every
treacherous pothole, every roadside stall that served a decent bowl of noodle soup at 3 in the morning. But even a road you know by heart can have its secrets. This happened on a run north, with Samchai's nephew, a young man named Wit, riding along for the first time. Wit was a university student from Bangkok, and this trip was his first real look at the vast, dark country that existed outside the city's perpetual hazy twilight. For him, the countryside was just green space on a map. For Samchai, it was a world of its own, with its own rules. It was late, well past midnight, and the air was thick with the kind of wet heat that clings to your skin like a second shirt. The drone of the diesel engine was the only sound in the world, a steady, hypnotic rhythm against the deafening chorus of unseen insects in the rice.
paddies on either side. Wit was dozing in the passenger seat, head against the vibrating window, the city lights a distant memory. He was startled awake not by a loud noise, but by a subtle change in the engine's song. The steady drone faltered for a half-second, a slight hesitation he wouldn't have noticed if the cab hadn't been his entire world for the past 6 hours. He opened his eyes. In the dim green glow of the instrument panel, he saw his uncle's silhouette, ramrod straight. Samchai was staring at the dashboard, his brow furrowed in a way Wit had never seen before. The fuel gauge. The needle, which had been comfortably above the halfway mark an hour ago, was now dipping precariously toward empty. It was dropping visibly, far, far faster than it should have. Samchai tapped the glass with a heavy knuckle, a familiar ritual for dealing with the quirks of old machinery. The needle didn't budge. He swore quietly, a low rumble of disbelief. "Can't be," he muttered, more to the truck than to Wit. He'd filled up in Singbori just a few hours ago. A leak that severe would leave a shimmering trail on the asphalt, and the smell of diesel would be overpowering. This felt different. This felt like the fuel was simply being erased. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at Wit. He pulled out his phone. No signal. The idea of being stranded out here in this suffocating, absolute darkness was a primal fear he'd only ever read about. The road was utterly deserted. They hadn't seen another pair of headlights in nearly an hour. Samchai, however,
shifted from confusion to action. He slowed the truck, pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, and killed the engine. The sudden silence was a shock. He grabbed a heavy flashlight from the door pocket. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice tight. Whit watched as his uncle climbed down and methodically checked the tank and the fuel lines, his beam cutting a sharp white cone through the blackness. After a few minutes, Samchai climbed back in, his face grim. Nothing. Not a drop spilled. It's dry as a bone. This was worse than a leak. This was illogical. It was a problem without a physical cause. "Keep your eyes open," he told Whit, starting the engine again. "Look for any sign of life. A house with a light on. A village. Anything." For 10 minutes that stretched into an eternity, there was nothing. Just the endless ribbon of
asphalt unspooling into the void and the dark, impenetrable wall of trees. The engine sputtered once, a violent cough that sent a jolt of fear through the cab. It was dying. And then Whit saw it, a single weak point of light far down the road. It was faint at first, a lonely star fallen to earth, flickering weakly as if struggling to stay lit. As they got closer,
it resolved into the distinct, boxy shape of a gas station sign. It was an old one, not one of the bright, modern PTT or Caltech stations. This was a small, independent place, the kind that was slowly being erased from the Thai countryside. A wave of relief so powerful it was almost nauseating washed over both of them. It was nothing short of a miracle. Samchai eased his foot off the accelerator, letting the truck's momentum carry it, coasting on fumes toward the entrance. The station was set back from the road, partially obscured by the drooping aerial roots of an ancient banyan tree, its branches like skeletal arms reaching out in the darkness. It consisted of a single small building, its windows dark, and 2 old-fashioned pumps under a simple tin roof. The only illumination came from a single long fluorescent tube above. The office door. It hummed and flickered erratically, casting a sickly, buzzing, pale light on the cracked concrete below, making the shadows dance and writhe. It looked quiet. Too quiet. As the truck rolled to a stop beside the pumps, its final rumble died and a profound silence descended. It wasn't just an absence of noise, it felt like a physical presence. A vacuum that had sucked all sound from the world. The chirping of the crickets, the entire soundscape of the rural night had been cut off as if by a switch. The air felt heavy, still, and unnaturally cool. The pumps were ancient, the kind with a spinning mechanical dial behind a cloudy glass face. They were coated in a thin layer of rust that looked like dried blood in the pale light. The air smelled of damp earth, stale gasoline, and something else, something cloyingly sweet and floral. It was the scent of dokra tree, the night-blooming jasmine, a fragrance often planted near spirit houses. But there was no spirit house to be seen, only the oppressive shadow of the banyan tree. Samchai killed the engine
and the sudden end of its vibration was deeply unnerving. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The place felt
suspended in time, a forgotten photograph. Whit looked at his uncle, who was just staring at the office door. It was closed, no signs of life within. "Maybe they're closed," Whit whispered, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. But just as he said it, the door creaked open with a sound like dry bones rubbing together. A woman stepped out into the pale light. She was of middle age, with her dark hair tied back in a neat, severe bun. She wore a simple, light-colored blouse and a dark, patterned sarong. Her face was plain, her expression utterly blank, unreadable. She didn't smile or offer a greeting. She just stood there, waiting, her movements smooth but without purpose, like a marionette whose strings had just gone slack. She seemed to be looking at them, but also through them. Somchai, ever the professional, recovered first. He pushed open his door, its groan echoing in the silence, and walked over to her. He spoke in a low, respectful tone, explaining their situation, the strange fuel loss. The woman simply nodded once, a slow, deliberate movement. Her actions were unhurried, almost dreamlike, as she walked to the pump. She didn't ask what kind of fuel or how much. She just picked up the heavy nozzle and, with an eerie silence, unscrewed their tank cap. While Somchai watched her, Whit's unease curdled into a quiet, creeping dread. He stayed locked inside the truck, his eyes darting around, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Through the grimy window of the office, he could see a calendar hanging on the wall. Even from this distance, he could tell the style was old, the photo of a long dead king faded by a sun that hadn't hit it in years. The year printed at the top was from more than 20 years ago. The prices listed on a faded, hand-painted sign by the road were impossibly low, figures from a different economic era. There was no clutter, no stacks of oil cans, no discarded snack wrappers, none of the usual detritus of a working station. It was clean, but not in a tidy way. It was clean in an empty, unused, abandoned way. He also noticed the fluorescent light above the door didn't attract a single moth or insect. They swirled in the truck's dying headlights, but avoided that pale, buzzing glow completely, as if it were a patch of cold fire. The woman finished filling the tank. The mechanical numbers on the pump spun to a silent stop. Somchai pulled out his wallet, a thick fold of worn leather, and counted out the banknotes. He held them out to her. She took the money, and for a brief second their hands touched. Somchai would later tell Whit that her skin was cold, not cool from the night air, but a deep, unnatural cold, like touching a stone from the bottom of a river, a chill that seemed to sap the warmth from his own fingers. He saw his uncle flinch just slightly, pulling his hand back faster than was natural. She took the cash without counting it, her dark eyes vacant, looking at something far beyond him. She turned and walked back into the office, closing the door behind her without a sound. The light above the door gave another violent flicker, buzzed loudly, then held steady. Somchai got back into the truck, his face a tight mask. He didn't say anything, just started the engine. It turned over instantly, purring smoothly. The fuel gauge now read full. The sense of relief he should have felt wasn't there. The oppressive atmosphere of the place was too heavy, too strange. As he put the truck in gear and began to pull away, Whit looked back at the office. For a split second, framed in the grimy window, he saw the woman's face, a pale shape in the darkness, watching them go. He blinked, and she was gone. They drove back onto the highway, the truck's tires crunching on the gravel drive. The moment they were back on the smooth asphalt, the sounds of the night returned, fading in as if a cosmic volume knob was being turned up. The crickets started their chorus again. The air in the cab felt lighter, breathable. Samchai let out a long breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Strange place," he muttered, more to himself than to Whit. Whit just nodded, his heart still hammering against his ribs. They drove in silence for another 5 kilometers, the profound weirdness of the encounter slowly beginning to fade, replaced by the simple, straightforward reality of the road ahead. The truck was running perfectly. The engine hummed with renewed power. They were safe. And then it sputtered. It was a single violent cough, a mechanical death rattle that shook the entire frame. The truck lurched violently. Samchai fought the wheel, his knuckles white. The engine sputtered again, a choked, gurgling sound, then cut out completely. All the lights on the dashboard flashed once, in a final frantic plea, then died. They were plunged into total darkness and silence, coasting to a dead stop on the shoulder of the empty highway. Samchai frantically tried the ignition. Nothing. Not a click, not a spark. It was utterly, profoundly dead. Whit switched on the small flashlight on his phone and aimed its thin beam at the dashboard. The fuel gauge needle was resting firmly,
defiantly, on empty. The tank was bone dry. It was impossible. They had just filled it. They had watched her do it. They had paid her. A cold dread, far worse than the fear of being stranded, settled over them. This wasn't a mechanical failure. This was something else. This was a trick played by the road itself. They sat there for what felt like an eternity. Finally, in the far distance, they saw the approaching headlights of another truck. Samchai flagged it down, and to their immense relief, it stopped. The driver was an old man, his face a road map of wrinkles, his eyes kind and weary. He listened patiently as Samchai, his voice still shaky, explained what had happened. The fuel vanishing, the miraculous appearance of the station, the silent woman. As Samchai described the place, the old driver's friendly expression slowly melted away. His face went pale under his tan, and he stared at them with a look of profound pity and fear. When Samchai finished, the old man was silent for a long time. He took a slow drag from a hand-rolled cigarette, the ember glowing in the dark cab. "Son," he said,
his voice a low, gravelly whisper. There is no gas station on this road. Not for a long time. He told them the story then, a piece of local history passed between truckers like a warning. 20, maybe 25 years ago, there was a small station right where they described. It was run by a woman named Mali and her husband. They were good people, worked hard. One night, a pair of thieves came, high on yaba. They wanted the day's earnings. Something went wrong. An argument, a struggle. Mali was killed during the robbery, right there, under the flickering fluorescent light by the office door. Her husband found her. He sold the place and moved away, a broken man. The station was shut down. It stood empty for years, a decaying shell, until the jungle swallowed it whole. There's nothing there now but a cracked concrete slab and some rusted metal skeletons half buried in the weeds. But the truckers who drive this road at night, the old-timers, they know the stories. They say that sometimes, if a driver is in desperate need, if their tank is running on fumes and their heart is full of worry, they'll see it, a single light, the station looking just like it did on its last night of business, and she'll be there, waiting to serve one last customer. She doesn't mean any harm, the old man said, his voice barely audible over the idling of his engine. She's just stuck, replaying a moment of service from a life that was stolen. The fuel she gives you is a memory. It feels real. It runs the engine, but it has no substance. The money you give her, they say you can sometimes find it by the roadside the next day, turned to dust and old leaves. The encounter is real enough to get you a few kilometers away from her, away from the sight of her pain, but then it vanishes, like waking from a dream. Somchai and Wit didn't say a word. They just listened, the unnatural coldness they'd felt at the station returning, a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. The old trucker gave them a ride to the next town. They never went back to look for the truck. Somchai called the company, said it had a catastrophic engine failure and that they should send a crew to tow it. He never explained the real reason. Wit never rode with his uncle on a night run again. The story isn't about a monster or a malevolent spirit. It's about a place stained with a single sad moment that never ended. It's about a quiet tragedy on a lonely road, an echo that still answers when someone calls out in need. And it's a chilling reminder that on the darkest roads, sometimes the most terrifying thing you can find isn't a ghost that wants to hurt you, but one whose help is just as empty as the gas tank she leaves you with.